as a final farewell to those we lost in '93. Some led long, full lives. Others had races left to run. The year-end issue of Life magazine that you have to have is now the TNT special that you'll never forget. Life Remembers, a special television event. Next, only on TNT.
Nothing marks 1993 as poignantly as remembering the men and women we lost this past year. They are a diverse group who enriched our lives in so many ways. But we're not here to mourn what we've lost. Instead, we'll celebrate what we've gained by having them as a part of our lives. Some of them shaped our culture, others defined our style, and some made history. Many of these men and women had long and productive lives, while others left our world all too soon. For some 7 decades, Life magazine has captured the essence of these people on its pages with unforgettable images. In the next hour, we'll remember them in their own words and from their friends and admirers. Through the lives of these personalities, the giants and the unsung heroes, we can see the 20th century unfold. Life remembers the people of 1993.
She transcends all time, all style.
He was not afraid at all of standing up to government officials, liberals, conservatives.
Don Drysdale and Roy Campanella, what a life they lived.
I think Deke gave a lot of kids a good role model to shoot for.
Disney's music really influenced me, you know, because he was a genius who never flaunted it.
Drazen Petrovic would have wound up being one of the best players in the NBA by far.
I do think of Arthur as an American hero, not just for blacks, just for everyone.
The thing that made Arthur Ashe and Thurgood Marshall stand out was that they were originals, one of a kind.
In 1993, the music community lost some of its most talented members. Some who wrote the music, others who sang or played it, and still others who reinvented it. One man spent a lifetime making country music popular, becoming one of Nashville's first superstars.
No one will ever know how much I love you so. My only prayer will be someday you'll care for me, but it's
Conway Twitty helped put Music City on the map with an impressive string of #1 hits over the past 30 years.
Conway Twitty has just got one of those voices that when you hear it, it grabs you. There's something about the way he sang it. You just knew that he was, when you hear that song, you just know he's given it 110%.
He put his arms around her shoulder, and with a voice that sounded older, he said, "Mom, I got something on my mind."
Twitty spent most of his career on the road, and wherever he sang, his fans were there, keeping the faith.
Everybody knows how much he's cared for the fans. The fans loved him, and the way that he loved them back was very unique, very special, very giving. The thing about your fans, If they love you, just love them back, and they'll love you for that, and he did it best.
Then it's goodbye time.
Lyricists are often the forgotten men and women of songwriting, but not Sammy Cahn. There's a good chance that every minute of every hour of every day, somebody somewhere is singing one of his songs.
Sammy would, when I moved into the same street where he lived, he said, anytime, as a good neighbor, he says, I'd like to tell you that anytime you need a cup of song, he said, come over to my house and I'll write one for you.
This hard-working founder of the Songwriters Hall of Fame was a singer's dream.
What makes that little old ant think he'll move?
Cahn wrote clever, award-winning lyrics for songs like Love and Marriage, Come Fly With Me, 3 Coins in the Fountain, and Time After Time.
Sammy was exactly like his songs. If you want the best autobiography of Sammy Cahn is to listen to the words of each song that he wrote. He was a very delicate poet.
Saturday night is the loneliest night of the week.
And then on top of that, he had an energy that was unbelievable. He will live forever. His songs will live forever.
With a style smooth and sexy, Mr. B, Billy Eckstine, made his mark in the 1950s as the first black singer to be a mainstream star in American pop music.
I love the rhythm in the riff. When the music comes, I get left body, anything to make it swing.
Before you even got to his music, you know, he was like this role model. The way he walked, the way he talked, and the way he dressed.
Billy Eckstine taught me an awful lot because he was a magnificent gentleman. And Billy Eckstine was such a, you know, he was just the most handsome man, young man, very beautiful looking, and young teenage girls, white girls, you know, fell in love with him. I mean, he made them swoon. He sang beautifully. He was a great gentleman. He was up there right with Sinatra as far as being adored. It actually scared a lot of advertisers and a lot of network people and everything. His career went down after that.
Musicians wanted to be like B, because B was cool. When B left us, he took a style away with him. Billy Eckstine made his life whatever he wanted it to be, and he lived fearlessly. He lived a 200% life.
All through his career, Billy Eckstine's rich and riveting baritone was a favorite with jazz audiences. In 1944, Eckstine formed an orchestra with Charlie Parker on sax, vocalist Sarah Vaughan, and Dizzy Gillespie as his musical director. That band lasted just a few years, but Dizzy's new ideas put the bop in bebop and changed the face of jazz.
So when Dizzy came on the scene, he started off playing kind of like that. But then he played with a different type of rhythm, the rhythm that he developed with Charlie Parker, which is more like... It's hard for me even to sing it. It's such an intricate style.
I heard that there was a great saxophone player playing at a place called Birdland on Broadway. So I went down on a Saturday night to just have a good time. And Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker were on the stage. And here comes this Charlie Parker. He just stuck the saxophone right up my nose. I had a front row seat. The intensity of Charlie Parker's horn with Dizzy playing was so strong that I actually ran out of the nightclub and regurgitated out in the street. And it was so strong It hit me emotionally. I didn't know anything about him before.
He pushed the trumpet into another age, like a more modern age, because you have this tremendous virtuosic, intricate way of playing, but still the underlying heat and fire is central to the trumpet tradition in jazz.
They took that kind of boldness, I guess, as a human being to express yourself musically like that, because he took chances, I mean, serious chances, up until the day he died.
Dizzy's music really influenced me, you know, because he was such a magnificent person. He was a genius who never flaunted it. He was always very gregarious. He loved people. He loved to entertain people, have fun with them.
He was very important in terms of popularizing the style of a jazz musician, because he was a real jazz musician. Like, he had that type of deep soul and intellect, that combination that really produces a real jazz musician. And he brought that around the world all of the time, and he always left people feeling good.
Next, Life Remembers Sporting Greats, when we return in a moment. "1993 was a year of unquestionable loss in the sporting world. From the baseball diamond to the basketball court to the racetrack, it seemed that every sport witnessed the passing of a promising player, a successful coach, or a Hall of Famer.
I think the athlete is a symbol of youth, of vibrancy, of health. And when that symbol is taken away, it seems to be more shocking, more tragic than when other people die.
It hit every sport, and it hit every culture, and it hit every human being, I think, who was a sports fan or not a sports fan. It really, I mean, we were struck, all of us, I think, by the enormity of it.
Earlier in the year, even before that first pitch on opening day, the game of baseball was hit hard. Former Dodger Tim Cruz and pitcher Steve Olin joined the Cleveland Indians for spring training in Florida. Both were part of a rejuvenated team that looked forward to a winning season. A fatal boating accident claimed Cruz and Olin, leaving Cleveland fans devastated. Once the season was underway, baseball lost two Hall of Famers from the legendary Boys of Summer. Dodgers pitcher Don Drysdale and catcher Roy Campanella.
Roy Campanella, 3 times MVP of the National League. That's quite an accomplishment. He was the kind of guy that never complained. He never alibied. He never cried. All he wanted to do was play baseball.
Campanella was the big guy, the power guy, the guy who, not that they didn't have others who could hit home runs, but he was the guy you could almost count on to deliver the home run when you wanted it.
A rare commodity, a catcher who could hit, Campanella was the backbone of a championship Brooklyn Dodgers team. Then, in 1958, a paralyzing car accident cut short his career. But Campy came back and coached for the Dodgers for many years, inspiring the world with his powerful love of life.
I can remember going to Dodger Stadium, and every once in a while he would come out of one of the booths and roll up to one of the aisles on the upper level, and the fans would just sort of gravitate to him, and he'd just smile at them and sign autographs and talk to them for a couple innings at a time, and he just was having the best time, just wanted to talk baseball. That's all he wanted to do, and he was in his element.
He coined this phrase, you got to have a lot of little boy in you to play the game of baseball. And so very, very true. He was like a little boy playing baseball. That's how much he loved the game. Don Drysdale and Roy Campanella, I never heard anybody say a bad word about him. What a life they lived. Don Drysdale played baseball like my wife shops all day long. And this guy went on to become one of the greatest pitchers that ever wore the Dodger uniform. He did not give an inch out on that mound. He said, hey, I can get you out. He had all the self-confidence in the world. He believed that there wasn't a hitter alive who could hit him.
He had an attitude that the plate, half of the plate belonged to him, and he wasn't ever going to tell the batter which half it was. And if the batter tried to take away the half that he thought it was, he'd flat hit him.
He said, I'm a Dodger. I was born a Dodger. I grew up loving the Dodgers. I played for the Dodgers, and I will die a Dodger. I think right now, the battery for tonight's game in heaven is Don Drysdale pitching, Roy Campanella catching. God, you got yourself one outstanding battery.
Baseball may be America's pastime, but auto racing is one of this country's most popular spectator sports. Stock car racing and its element of danger holds a certain thrill for its audience, with crashes a common sight. 2 NASCAR champions were fatally injured this year, both at the peak of their careers.
In auto racing, the people who follow the sport, the people who are engaged in the sport, know that the possibility of tragedy is always there. They know that death rides with them. When these 2 men were killed in accidents that had nothing to do with their driving, the shock was almost twice as great.
Alan Kulwicki was unique, a northerner competing in a traditionally southern sport. Kulwicki had just achieved his dream of winning NASCAR's ultimate honor, the 1992 Winston Cup. He died at age 38 when his plane crashed on his way to a race.
Kulwicki brought education to the sport. Allison brought genes to the sport.
Davey Allison was a young NASCAR winner from a racing family plagued by incredible tragedies over the years. Crashes on the track killed brother Donnie and seriously injured his father, Bobby. But Davey's career ended with a fatal helicopter crash. 2 young basketball players left us this year. Both were on their way to becoming superstars. For Drazen Petrovic and Reggie Lewis, we can only wonder what could have been.
Well, when Drazen Petrovic died, the New Jersey Nets lost a very good basketball player, but Croatia lost a national hero. And he was huge. He was as big in Croatian basketball as Larry Bird was in America.
Drazen Petrovic would have wound up being one of the best players in the NBA by far. I mean, he already was considered probably the best shooting guard in the league. As he was on the court trying to keep his mind on everything that he was being paid to do, his thoughts were still half across the sea, wondering where his family was, wondering what was happening there, wondering whether he ever had a home to go back to.
Petrovic left the New Jersey Nets at the end of the '93 season to return to his war-torn homeland of Croatia. A fatal car crash ended a promising future. In Boston, Celtics fans looked to team captain Reggie Lewis to fill the void left by retired champion Larry Bird. But Lewis had a serious heart problem, and despite the risk, he was determined to play the game he loved. A fatal heart attack took Lewis at the age of 27.
Well, when I think about Reggie, I think of him just being a consummate professional in every sense of the word, whether it being a basketball player, a family man, a friend.
He was a quiet leader. I mean, he showed a lot by example. He wasn't a vocal type of player. He wasn't a vocal type of person. But he worked hard. He would get to practice an hour before everybody leaves. Be the last one to leave the gym.
Losing Reggie Lewis, basketball lost a very good player. But more important was what Boston, and particularly the black community in Boston, lost as a role model to young people and as someone who would help those young people.
One of the sports world's biggest losses was a man who made his name not as a player, but as a leader. Jim Valvano will be remembered as the coach who led his North Carolina State team to the 1983 NCAA championship. For Jimmy V, life was an all-or-nothing proposition, and he never gave less than 100%.
He was the kind of guy who could walk into a crowd of people, could walk into a crowd of strangers, and they'd be his friends in 5 minutes. Whether they liked basketball or not, it didn't make any difference.
If you have someone with a dream, if you have a motivated person with a dream and a goal and a vision, if you have someone who never gives up, who has great hope, And that team taught me the persistence, the idea of never, ever quitting. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop fighting.
The man who would never quit lost a battle with cancer at age 47. True to form, he went out fighting.
Cancer can take away all my physical abilities. It cannot touch my mind, it cannot touch my heart, and it cannot touch my soul.
Life remembers the legendary entertainers when we return in a moment. Over the last 7 decades, Life magazine has reported on the men and women who've contributed to our culture as entertainers and artists. Some made us smile, others made us cry. A few moved us with their grace and poise, doing things we can only do in our dreams.
Comes the point where a woman doubts her husband's sincerity. There's nothing more to do. Everything is over. Goodbye, Martha.
Goodbye, Henry. Now, for the powder room, in here, I want you to match this thread, and don't lose it. It's the only spool I have, and I had an awful time finding it. As you can see, it's practically an apple red, somewhere between a healthy wine sap and an unripened Johnson.
Uh-huh.
Excuse me.
Oh, it's only you, Lily. I thought it was something scary.
Do you know where you are, Bartolome?
Don Medina, I am Francis Barnum.
I will tell you where you are. You are about to enter hell, Bartolome. Hell!
Eddie, would you mind, or would you be upset even, if I were to attach strut D to aperture E with rivet P instead of rivet F?
No.
Oh, that's great. You'll never be an architect, but you'll get through life.
If I were different, if I were not the king.
Why do you say that?
Could you still love me if I were not the king?
What do you think of yourself tomorrow?
Virginians! Virginians! With me! Who will come with me?
There's not another road anywhere that looks like this road. I mean, exactly like this road. It's one kind of place. One of a kind. Like someone's face.
At first glance, you'd think that Rudolph Nureyev and Federico Fellini had little in common. But the superb ballet dancer and the sublime film director shared the same obsession. Their life was their art. Rudolph Nureyev was a man in constant motion from the moment he was born on a train steaming through Siberia. He once said, "If I don't dance, I crumble." On stage and off, Nureyev seemed tireless, a slave to dance, a citizen of the world. Nureyev gave fire and flashy charisma to the world of classical ballet. From the time of his defection from the Soviet Union in 1961, he graced stages around the world, bringing new audiences to the art.
My country is stage. My nationality is a dancer. I was born a dancer, and I understand, or I understood at very tender age, that's the thing I have to do.
Nureyev never officially retired. He said, "I will keep dancing till the last moment, the last drop." For Nureyev, the last dance came at age 54, a victim of AIDS. If Nureyev's life was a ballet stage, Federico Fellini's life was a movie set. Fellini's movies weren't strictly autobiographical, but he would willingly admit that flashes of his own memories formed the core of each film.
I knew that I could not be an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor. In a very confused way, I wanted to be a writer, a newspaperman, an actor, a poet, a painter. I am just a storyteller.
The words Fellini and film are inseparable. The Italian director once said his films are like love affairs. Fellini's obsession with his work was fueled by a passion for life, captivated by a world both good and grotesque.
I think Fellini liked the fact that there were lots of images in his films that could never be explained completely. He dealt with films the way poets sometimes deal with symbols. If you can explain it, it's too simple. But I think when you go to a Fellini film, you have to be prepared to check your preconceptions at the door and just follow him wherever he wants to go.
He was an inspiration in that he revealed whatever was going on in his mind and his soul. Life is like a circus. It's a wonderful, strange procession of bum, 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 ba-dum, ba-bum, ba-dum, you know, all that stuff. That was Fellini.
Helen Hayes, Lillian Gish, and Audrey Hepburn were more than great performers. They were also great people who gave of themselves. Helen Hayes and Lillian Gish had long, prolific acting careers that spanned virtually the entire 20th century. Hayes, the First Lady of the American Theater, and Gish, the First Lady of the Screen, had in common not only their devotion to their work, but also a lifelong friendship. They died within weeks of each other, friends to the end.
What is charm exactly, Maggie?
Oh, it's a sort of bloom on a woman. If you have it, you don't need anything else. And if you don't have it, it doesn't much matter what else you have.
Charm was just one of the qualities that Helen Hayes possessed. There's a story that as a child, her mother took her to see a production of The Merry Widow. When the show ended, a mesmerized Helen insisted on staying, declaring that she wouldn't leave the theater. She was true to her word.
I always think of my life in terms of a play because that's my whole home, my school, my university. The theater has been everything in my life.
But her movie career was equally impressive. She won her first Oscar in an extraordinary way with her first starring role.
When I was a little girl, Father Matthew used to say to us children, you pay for everything in this life. And last night when we were dancing, I thought of him and I laughed to myself and I said, what an old fool you are, Father Matthew. But he was right. And I'm paying.
While she focused on the theater, Hayes would occasionally make movies, always with memorable results. In Airport, Hayes won her second Oscar and charmed a new generation of fans.
Excuse me, madam. May I see your ticket?
You're English, aren't you? I knew it the moment you started to talk. You make our language sound so delightful. My late husband used
Never mind what he said. What about your ticket?
Well, I'll certainly look, my dear, but I'm sure...
Why didn't you stop wasting my time, Mrs. Quonset? You are Mrs. Ada Quonset, aren't you?
Well, since you're aware of who I am, there's no use denying it, is there?
I have one phrase that I've made, and I like it. To rest is to rust. And I say this over and over, and I'm getting a little monotonous with it, but it's true that the older you are, the more you should keep active.
The same could be said for Lillian Gish. Both she and the movies came into the world a century ago. Even from her earliest days, Gish knew it was the actor's life for her. When Lillian and her sister Dorothy, still in their teens, met director D.W. Griffith in 1909, they feared making movies would jeopardize their careers on the legitimate stage. Fortunately for us, they took that risk. Movies were a brand new art form, and Griffith and the Gishes became pioneers.
Remember, when he was making films, there was no place to go to find out how to do things. He had to try out different ways and means of telling an audience what the story was, and you had the responsibility of making whatever character you played believable to an audience. You had to be an actress, but you could never be caught acting.
Griffith brought his camera in close, and every nuance of Gish's performance was picked up by the lens. With a face like this, who needs dialogue? Lillian Gish made movies for a remarkable 8 decades. When she died at the age of 99, a long chapter of movie history ended on a graceful note. Over the years, one woman appeared on the cover of Life magazine time and again. With consummate style and grace, Audrey Hepburn became one of our most beloved actresses.
There are so many words used to describe her, but I think the most fitting one about just the sheer look of her is elegant. I mean, it is as if the word elegant was invented for her.
She managed to blend sophistication and glamour and innocence in a way that no one else was able to, until Julia Roberts, I think, in Pretty Woman.
To be compared to her is a wonderful compliment and is very flattering, and certainly, you know, it would be something for one to aspire to be that giving and that selfless and good, but there will be no other Audrey Hepburn. Anything else is sort of a pale imitation.
I will cherish my visit here in memory as long as I live.
Audrey Hepburn never cared for the typical movie star lifestyle. Her life was private, her wants were few, her concerns were for others less fortunate.
She so devoted herself to people, and particularly children, and was so giving with her time and her love. I mean, I think that in her work and in the way that she worked for UNICEF, there's such a selflessness to it. There's such an infinite giving.
I've been given a career which has brought me nothing but fun and friends and happiness, and enabled me to work with some of the greatest talents this industry has ever known. And for that, I get an award.
She smiles, I smile. She starts to cry, I start to cry. She loses the guy, I lose the guy. I mean, you feel everything she feels, but that was her gift. Her gift was giving performances in a very open-handed way that she just gave freely and completely.
Billy Wilder said about her one of the loveliest things I ever heard. He said, God kissed Audrey on the cheek, and there she was.
How do I look?
I must say I'm amazed.
You were a darling to help. I could never have done it without you.
Audrey Hepburn died of cancer at age 63, after a lifetime of giving so much of herself to a world that adored her. She was an exceptional woman whose beautiful face matched her beautiful soul. Life remembers the heroes of 1993 when we return in a moment. American society looks up to its heroes. Heroes that come in many forms, from all walks of life. Yet there's one quality that they all have in common: perseverance. Like activist Cesar Chavez and astronaut Deke Slayton. Deke Slayton was one hero who pursued a seemingly impossible dream. In the 50s, Slayton was chosen as one of the 7 original Mercury astronauts at the dawn of the manned space program.
No one was more dedicated to his craft, to flying, than Deke Slayton. I never knew anyone, I don't think, was a more dedicated pilot. Deke loved to fly in the service, loved military flying, flying fighter airplanes. He waited a long time to fly on a spacecraft, though. It was some 16 years. You know, he was assigned to a flight right after my flight back in 1962. And then he came up with a tiny heart murmur.
Slayton was grounded from space, but not from the space program. For 16 years, he supervised operations at NASA as a civilian. Then, in 1975, after diligently working to improve his health, Slayton got his chance to prove he had the right stuff. At the age of 51, he reached space as a member of the historic Apollo-Soyuz flight.
5, 4, 3, 2, engine sequence start. 1, 0, launch commit. We have a liftoff.
When you launch, you're continually accelerating, and you come out the top at about 150 miles, doing 2,500 feet, 1,000 feet per second, or 17,000 miles an hour. So that's a great sensation. I'd like to do it at least once a day, you know.
I think Deke gave a lot of kids a good role model to shoot for. He wasn't pushy, elbowing other people out of the way. He was very dedicated. I remember Deke talking about the mission was a piece of cake. The hard part was learning to speak Russian before he could be on that flight. But he enjoyed that flight so much, and he had waited 16 years. He stuck with it. That's how dedicated he was.
Cesar Chavez was a persevering hero as well. A modest man with a difficult mission, he selflessly championed the cause of the migrant worker. By organizing the United Farm Workers Union and taking on the powerful growers, Chavez made us all think about those who harvest the food we buy.
Lettuce may be different from grapes, but the human misery is the same, whether it's a grape field or a lettuce patch. And basically, it's about the same thing. We're asking people to make an additional sacrifice so that these human beings will be able to enjoy some economic freedom.
He was not afraid at all of standing up to government officials, liberals, conservatives. He didn't care. He spoke for farm workers, and he was willing to take that cause to wherever it might lead.
The son of a migrant worker, Chavez knew from his own experience that if someone didn't empower the men and women in the fields, society would suffer. His faith in his church and in human nature joined together a cross-section of America in support of his boycotts.
Well, this was not patty cake kind of politics, shadow boxing. Chavez was real. He had all the flaws of any other human being, but he did have a commitment and a willingness to be with the people that he was working for. He died in a farm worker house, a modest house in Yuma, Arizona. He was there fighting for farm workers. And whether you fought with him or you fought against him, he gave his life, he gave himself for his cause, and that's powerful.
Singer Marian Anderson, Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, and tennis player Arthur Ashe came from different backgrounds, but they shared a common thread. Each fought a very personal battle against racism in America. In 1939, contralto Marian Anderson was denied the use of a Washington, D.C. concert hall owned by the Daughters of the American Revolution. Undaunted, she appealed to First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, and on Easter Sunday, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, Anderson sang to over 75,000 Americans, black and white. 16 years later, Marian Anderson broke another color barrier in the arts as the first black American to sing with the Metropolitan Opera. But on that day in 1939, her rich voice and her quiet dignity helped inspire the growing civil rights movement. In that struggle for equality, few Americans were as eloquent or as brilliant as Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. As a lawyer for the NAACP in the 30s and 40s, Marshall used the courtroom as his stage and the Constitution as his weapon in the war on racism.
My dad told me way back that you can't use race. For example, there's no difference between a white snake and a black snake. They're both bite.
I first met Thurgood Marshall as a 6th grade student when he was a tall, slender young man pleading a case in Louisiana for the equalization of teachers' salaries. I saw him as a young man challenging the whole history of racism and segregation and doing it with intelligence and eloquence and with a sense of self-confidence and assuredness that I had seldom seen, if ever, in anybody black.
We knew in the beginning that the courts could not solve the problem because the courts just don't have that authority. It's the public, the minds, the souls of the people that have to do it, and you do that with protest.
The idea that all men and women were endowed, well, it said all men were endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Thurgood Marshall said, wait a minute. When they said that, they really meant just white men. But it really, in order for it to make America really what America has to be, that all men has to become a generic phrase. It has to include women. It has to include people of color. It has to include children. It has to include the poor. And he expanded the system to make it inclusive of all of God's children.
A soft-spoken young man named Arthur Ashe took on racism with an unlikely weapon, a tennis racket. His achievements on the court were remarkable, but his activism against injustice made Arthur Ashe a hero for all people. This 1968 cover of Life magazine featured this story, the icy elegance of Arthur Ashe. It was cool concentration that allowed Ashe to win titles at both Wimbledon and the U.S. Open, the first black player to do so. But beneath his calm surface, there burned a strong passion, a passion for living, for doing the right thing.
Well, with Arthur, being cool was both an adjective and a noun. He was not driven to be a champion. He was a champion because he loved the sport and wanted to be the best that he could be. In fact, I think the highest moment of achievement at Wimbledon, he achieved not by being aggressive and overpowering, but by being subtle and intelligent. And it was typical of the way he lived, and it was typical of the way he played the game.
But Ashe faced his toughest challenge in 1992, when impending news reports forced him to go public with this emotional announcement.
I have known since the time of my brain operation in September 1988 that I have AIDS.
I asked Arthur what was the toughest thing, you know, for your life, really. Has it been AIDS? What is it? He said, without any question, being born a black man. He said that had been his the most difficult part of his life, day in and day out. And he said the AIDS didn't even come close, the bypass operations didn't even come close.
In 1968, and in 1969 and 1970, the South African government told me I could not play in Johannesburg. Case closed. I'm personally involved in apartheid. I'm not involved in some armchair philosophical way. I was discriminated against, and I got involved.
Oh, I think Arthur was raised to be a role model. The truth of it is, everybody black growing up in the 30s and 40s was taught that you have to bear the burden of the race, and that whatever you do affects whatever anybody else black has an opportunity to do.
I have been an activist on many issues in the past. Against apartheid, for education and the athlete, the need for faster change in tennis. I will continue with those projects in progress and will certainly get involved with the AIDS crisis.
I do think of Arthur as an American hero, not just for blacks or not just for everyone. He doesn't speak very often or very much, but when he did, his words and his actions really matched. And that's what heroes probably do. If you think about different heroes through the years, their actions and words matched.
AIDS claimed Arthur Ashe at the age of 49. Till the day he died, he never stopped trying to make the world better for all of us. Life Remembers will return in a moment. It's hard to say goodbye to the men and women we remember from 1993. The music makers, the athletes, the entertainers, the heroes. They contributed so much to our world, enriching our lives through their lives. These are the people that life remembers.